Welcome everyone to another ATG webinar. My name is Shawn, Technical Evangelist at CTC Software, and today I'm going to take you through what is the Data Suite. We're going to go over a comprehensive introduction as to what this suite can do for you and your company and what it's kind of really designed to do in the first place. So really, let's give a quick general description. The Data Suite is built around the ability to extract data from your Revit project out to some external data source or external data storage like Microsoft SQL Server or JSON files or XML. Now this can allow your team to do a lot of stuff with this, especially the creation of reports. And these reports can then be, taking your Revit data and possibly other data as well and writing some interesting, or understanding and analyzing the data to figure out where issues might be arising or how the Revit project data might affect your full workflows. Now, once this is extracted, you can take these template visuals and build whatever graphics it is you want. We're going to take a look today at some of the functionality, kind of how it works. I'm not going to get super far into the weeds. There's some really detailed information about BIM Data Suite setup in our documentation and some other webinars, but certainly we're going to go through the exercise of how you can leverage this at an entry level and give kind of an overview of what this does. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can get your hands on the suite. That's always an important step here, of course. The Data Suite is a very complicated, well, that's not perhaps correct. It's a very in-depth tool set. It takes a bit of setup to get it going, but once going, you can leverage that data ongoing. But to understand that, we kind of guard a little bit of how you get that suite, and then also some information about the tools and the installation processes. We're going to take a quick look at demonstration of data acquisition, but we're going to focus primarily today on the actual reports that get generated out of the Data Suite itself. And I feel like that's more important just because looking at a whole bunch of tables of data isn't really very interesting for most people. Really, you want to see what you can do with the data, what the data itself is going to be beneficial, how it's going to be beneficial to you. So with that, let's jump in live and start taking a look at the software itself. Now, what I'm going to do is toggle over into Revit. Now, Revit is the primary tool we're sourcing this data from. And inside of Revit, what you might notice here on the ribbon is a button on my BIM Data Suite here that says Project Snapshot Exporter. And that's correct, right? That's one of the major tools. Now, this particular major tool will typically only get installed on a handful of computers. It doesn't get installed everywhere. There's actually a tool you do not see in the background that's constantly running called the Project Activity Logger. And what it's watching for is for when I'm opening up projects and when I'm syncing to Central on projects. In fact, if I run a synchronize to Central right now, and I'll just go ahead and compact this model and make whatever choices I'm going to make, you won't see anything actually happen in my Revit interface. But behind the scenes with that save, it was actually logging this information off to SQL Server, which is how I'm storing my data, and then I can leverage that information. Now, when it's capturing that with the Project Activity Logger portion, that invisible portion of the Data Suite, it's capturing stuff like who I am, so what my login username is, what computer I'm on, and what the specs are, and how long it took to open my project when I was opening it. And just now, when I synchronized to Central, it was capturing sort of that same information, who I am, what computer I'm on, what my connection to the network is, how long it took to sync, but then it's also capturing other stuff like how many views I have, how many rooms perhaps are unenclosed in my model, how many warnings. And it's capturing this so that a BIM manager later on can actually take and analyze this information and figure out if this project is healthy or if it's not so healthy. Now, conversely here, there's another portion of the suite that I mentioned a moment ago, which is the Project Snapshot Exporter, the second tool. This second tool is, again, only designed for BIM managers, not for everybody. So the PAL, the Project Activity Logger portion, that gets installed everywhere on everybody's computer, but the Snapshot Exporter goes much deeper into the model. It goes beyond just how many views and how many warnings and perhaps a light description of the warnings. It lets me dig in to figure, in the code plan, floor plan view, there's a room tag, and it's associated to a room such and such, and every single parameter value that's on that room. And if I was to click onto a wall, it actually looks at the wall and knows all of its instance properties. And it can look into the type data inside of here and see type properties of this wall also, and every door and piece of furniture and reference plane that's drawn. It tracks everything, or can track everything pretty much in the model. Now, if you're capturing all that information, of course, it's going to take a lot longer, right? If you're opening up a Revit project and it takes a minute to open up a project, can you imagine how long it might take to go through and query every single piece of data out of that model? So the Project Snapshot Exporter, designed again for BIM managers, allows me to go through and actually filter the data. I can tell it exactly what kinds of Revit categories, or which Revit categories explicitly to go after, what types of data it is that I'm interested in, and which parameters specifically on that data to go after. I can also tell it, level specific searches. I can go by phase if I want to. I can search in a specific view and find just elements that are visible in that view, so I can leverage some of my Revit filters. And then I can tell it where it's going to go, and typically I'd be putting it to my SQL server, and then I'd begin my actual process of capturing this. Now, this can take a little bit. If I was to capture absolutely everything out of this background model, it's probably going to take me about, 40 minutes to go after everything. But most people typically don't go after everything. You're usually interested in things that are related to the project's health. And so with those filters, you can tune that way down. And this background model that is about 45 to 50 meg in file size, I can capture it in about 3 minutes by using my health type filters. Or if you were interested in other kinds of data, maybe you wanted to know, square footage reports on a building. Maybe you're doing some data capture for the purpose of facility maintenance or future estimation or project bidding or all kinds of different reasons. You can change the exact data you're going after and change how long it takes to actually go after it. Now, if I wanted to do this, right now I'm triggering it manually. If I wanted to, I can have this put on a schedule and I can have it go after a certain number of projects. I can tell it which projects I want it to capture, and then I can have it run these filters against those projects perhaps after hours. So that way I'm not doing this by hand. I can have it running on a computer and opening up and capturing those models, on some kind of a schedule, maybe every Thursday or every Friday or every Monday, maybe every Monday and Friday, right? You can choose exactly when you want it to go after those. So again, going after this information is one step, and that's the purpose of the data suite, to allow you to capture the performance information of the model with the project activity logger. As every user is opening up and saving models, how long is that taking, and what are the different indicators of the performance there you want to go after, and what are the factors on the computers? That's one step. And then the deep dive into the data using the Project Snapshot Exporter. Both of those are being saved to the same database. It's being saved, in my case, to Microsoft SQL Server. And I could open up Microsoft's SQL Management Studio, but again, looking at tables and tables of data is really not very interesting. Instead, what I typically will do is I'll open up a tool like Tableau or Click or Microsoft's Power BI. There's a number of different tools you can use to analyze this data. And when you're analyzing it, you can start putting graphs behind that information. So that's what we're going to primarily focus on today, is looking at some of the reports you can glean from the information that's captured using the data suite itself. The data suite is just a conduit, again, to get information out of your project and out of your daily Revit users' workflows. So what I'm going to do is open up one of the reports here. The first report is an example of our project activity logging information. So this understands exactly which models I'm going after, which models users are opening, what projects they're associated to, if those projects happen to be approaching some deadlines. I've seen some of my clients tie this database with dates and times in to something like Deltek Vision, so they can understand exactly which projects have which deadlines, and they can track which projects maybe need a little bit of love right now. I usually notice that stuff starts hitting fans within about 2 weeks of a project deadline. And you may notice something similar, or maybe yours is a little bit further out. Maybe it's 3 weeks from deadline. Maybe it's tighter. Maybe it's 1 week from deadline. Whatever your pattern is, you can understand which projects have upcoming deadlines and then maybe focus on them a little more closely. So I'll be looking specifically today at this project 2013-02-01. And we will use that one kind of as our example. You can also look down here as to which projects are getting the most time invested in them. So I can mouse over one of these and look at, oh, hey, that project that I just mentioned, it's got 97 hours worth of time invested in that project. There's another one over here. It's a different project model that has 98 hours of time invested in it. There's another one down below that's only got 4 hours invested. Right, but the nice thing here is that you can look at this information very quickly and see where people are spending or where projects are getting the most time. You can see if there's over budget, whatever. You can actually put budgetary information in there if you really wanted to, as far as how much time has been allocated to the project and see how close these projects are getting. That's another data field you could potentially choose to track. I can also see who my top contributors are here, who's putting the most time in. Now, my data set's a little skewed here because most of this is just me and my data from my little sessions while I'm setting up for demos. So it's got me as the primary user here. But in your company, you would see a better breakout of different amounts of time invested by individuals in the company. Also down below here, you can start to see things like your company's average sync to central. I'm saying that my company's average is 10.01 seconds for all of my projects. And I can see within the last week or so how long or how those models are actually responding in comparison to the average. I see here that I have an outlier. This actually was back from a couple of months ago, but it took 62 seconds to open instead of what most of my other models are taking here, which is in the 2 and 3 or 4 second time to open. Again, I'm using a very small data set. Your times are probably going to be a little higher than mine, and your averages will be higher than mine as well. But again, the ability to see what the averages are is important. Similarly, over here, in addition to the sync to central, I'm seeing company-wide open duration. So I can see across the entire company, it takes about 33 seconds to open models, so about half a minute, right? And I can see if there's any outliers there as well. I see that there's one right here from a little while back, again, about 2 or 3 months ago. That took 858 seconds to open. And I'd probably want to go and figure out why that particular model, especially since it looks like it's a house, like it's a residential house, that it took so long to open that model. That's a little bit crazy. And so I could maybe give that project some love. Now, I'm not seeing it happen again over here, but it's important to know that it happened at some point. Now, you can see across the bottom, I have a ton of tabs down here, and I can look at the different information about this. Now, I was mentioning I was going to look at that 201-30201 project right there. And looking at this, I can see that there's 10 days until that project is issued. I can see which models are a part of this project, and I can see who's investing time into which models and how many items they've been editing. And on this project, just like on that main page, I can see who the top contributors are by number of hours invested and by number of items edited over here. I can look at the performance of that file, and I can start to understand model by model exactly how fast this project is responding. I can see here that my open duration looks like it's starting to ramp up. And that could be a problem. If it's getting slower and slower, especially near a deadline, I may want to focus on this project and figure out what's going on. Now, an important thing to understand also is the file size. And so here I can scroll over and see as my file is being developed, how that file size is increasing. Now, I'm not really doing a whole lot of work in my projects, so my file size is relatively stable, but for whatever reason, even though it's a stable file size and my warnings haven't changed whatsoever, I'm seeing that my open time here is increasing, and also my sync to central time, my last sync to central there, was actually my slowest sync. It was 18.29 seconds, which is not crazy. This isn't any reason for concern in my case. But if you were seeing these go a little bit more crazy, in the 2, 3, 4 minute range, then that might be something to concern yourself with. But having these indicators on demand and not waiting for users to complain, now that's a really important thing. Because now instead of me needing to drop my work instantaneously and go solve exactly why this project is crashing, I don't need to do that. I can start seeing, hey, it's getting slow. I should probably give this project some love, especially since it's getting so close to deadline. I may want to focus a bit more on it and make sure that it doesn't get to a point where users start complaining about incredibly slow projects or files that are crashing. You can also see some of the detail behind this. As I'm scrolling across here, if I click on one of these saves, this one was from a little while ago, 9/19 over here. When I'm looking at this particular save, I can see the exact computer that was used. I can see the exact IP address. Now, I had a couple over here that when I clicked on them, I seem to recall, this guy over here, if I can click on it, there we go. This was a wireless internet connection. And this guy over here, I believe one of these was my wired LAN connection over here. Either way, you can take a look at the different individual types of connections, what the IP address is, and maybe derive if somebody's not plugging into the network properly. You can see a full history of Synced Essentials. This is just another way of looking at the information. You can see summary of users, which users are spending their time in which models. I can click on specific users here and see exactly the project, how much time they've been spending, how many edited items they have in those projects. So if there's a new user in the company, maybe I use this as a way to focus on some training and teach them some things. If I see that something is going a little squirrely on a project they're on, maybe I can focus on what they're exactly doing. And not that I'm using this, to big brother somebody and use it as a reason to fire them. No, my goal here is to use this as a way of training up my workforce and focusing that training to make it more efficient. So I can use this for a lot of different reasons. I'm using it for enterprise overall, which projects are coming up. I'm using it for specific model performance. I'm using it to see where users are investing their time and where I may have to, focus on some things. You can also laser focus in on things like warnings over here. So I can see a specific project model. I can see exactly the number of warnings, in this case 13, affecting 26 elements. I can see the breakout of where those warnings are affecting things. And I can also scroll down and see an exact list of each and every individual warning with element IDs listed. And all of this happens without me ever having to open the model myself, right? So I'm able to go in there and just look at these reports. And maybe I break these reports out and give them to different individuals who are interested in the different portions of this, but you can go access this data pretty much on demand. Now, let's say this particular model was having problems and I wanted to dig deeper into it. So far, I've been looking completely at the information that's gathered behind the scenes. As users are opening and saving, this is all information that's just being given to me. Now let's go take a look at the snapshot portion of this. With the snapshot portion, I'm looking at the information a little bit more differently. I wanted to see a breakdown in scores on different areas of the model. So this exact same Revit project, the one that we were just looking at moments ago for the performance, I can see the file size is about 50 meg. I can see that there's 78 project parameters in that project, and I can see that 7 of them are actually invisible. That's what the little change in color there might mean. And that can give me a score. I can see those same 13 warnings I was looking at a moment ago, and then comparing that to the file size, I get a score based on this as well. I'm seeing how many work sets, how many links or imports happen to be in my project. And 14 imports might actually be some cause for concern there. I'm seeing how many line styles, how many text types. Maybe I can use this to derive whether or not somebody's been exploding drawings in my project. Now, 3 text types and having all of them used, that pretty much tells me no one's exploding stuff. In fact, I've only got 4 instances of text. There's not a lot of text in there right now at all. I can also see pretty standard number of line styles in my project. So I'm not really concerned about that. So there's probably no DWG exploding going on. But I can see that there's some imports in this project, and I might want to focus on that. So if I jump down here to my links and imports tab, looking at this particular tab here, I can see that for Revit and CAD imports specifically, there's 8 total instances, or total definitions, 20 total instances across the board. Looking here, I've got imported file 2, and there's 4 instances of those imports. Linked models, I have 6 definitions and 6 instances over here. So I'm actually going to filter out the linked models and focus exclusively on those imported ones. And focusing on the CAD stuff over here exclusively, I'm noticing that I've got 2 definitions for instances. So here's one of my definitions, which is base model 02 that was imported as a 3D import to the workset interior. And then I've got 3 other instances of this same definition here of lower level. So I can use this to figure out exactly where they are, what views they're in, and laser focus my efforts on repairing this model because I'm able to dig really deeply into the model. If I jump back over to the overview tab specifically, I can start taking a look at things like component families. There's 35 unused component family definitions and 68 types. Again, that gives me scores, and I can go down here to component families and start to filter this out if I care to. Maybe I only want to look at model component families. I can see there's 129 total loaded component families here that are model-based. Looking at this, I can say, well, hey, what about casework? What do I have casework-wise? And start filtering this down. I could dig as deep as looking at the actual parameter values if I really cared to. In my case, I don't, but I certainly could. If I was wondering where this particular family type was coming from, I could click on that and start to identify exactly, which families perhaps are using this. Or if I click on a certain family, I can see exactly which types are related to it, right? So you can start to really filter down and understand exactly where information is coming from inside your model. All right, let's take a look at one other piece of information here. How can you get your hands on the data suite? So if I jump back over to, I'm going to jump into Windows Explorer, or sorry, Internet Explorer over here. No, I lied, not Internet Explorer. I'm going to jump into Chrome. That's what I typically use over here. And inside of Chrome, if you look up here, I'm on the ctcsoftware.com web page, and scrolling down, you can see right here is the BIM Data Suite. Now, if you go into the BIM Data Suite, you have the ability to contact us for pricing and demos and the ability to purchase this. You can also get some more descriptions and some specific demonstrations of just the project activity logger if you wanted, or just the project snapshot exporter, a much deeper dive into those two explicit tools. But the goal here is that you can get all the information you need and have the ability to get a trial potentially of the data suite. One important note about the data suite: it does work on all supported versions of Revit. And when you install it, you get one download, basically, and one installer set that automatically applies itself to all these different versions of Revit. So you're not installing and maintaining multiple individual installs, per version and updates per version. That's kind of tedious. So we automatically apply to all of them, and that'll save you a little bit of time in your configuration. Now, there's one new thing for Data Suite that's about to come out here pretty soon. So far, I was showing you all of these reports in a tool set called Microsoft Power BI. When you're using this, this is the most powerful way of leveraging this, when you write your own reports in a tool like Tableau or Power BI. However, the setup for this is a little bit involved. Again, you have to make sure you've got SQL Server set up, and you have to have an administrator on staff that can understand how to use SQL Server and write some queries if you're running into some dead end. And that for some people was a bit of a hurdle. Coming out very shortly, not out just yet, but I want to kind of get your interest piqued here. Coming out very shortly is a tool set that's basically the data suite with its data storage in the cloud. Now, this actually lightens the load on you for needing to go ahead and configure all of this stuff yourself. And while you do get these template reports here that I'm showing you today, both for the project activity logger and that health check report, you can certainly customize those. But if you don't have the ability or the staff to go ahead and set up and maintain all that infrastructure, we have what's coming out called PAL or Data Suite in the cloud. And up here, you can kind of see I've got a little example of this where you can start to look at that similar type of project information. If I click a project here at random, I see a dashboard that tells me about the project performance again, how it's opening and saving. Now, this is a different data set. This isn't that same project I was looking at moments ago. This is a little bit more appropriate a data set for client content that I've been allowed to show. Down below here, I can see some basic metrics about, file open time, how large the files themselves are. I can see who's working on these projects. And if I want to, I can jump over here into the health area and start again seeing open and save durations for the models. And I can zoom into these areas if I really wanted to and start taking a deeper dive look as to how long these projects are opening and saving. I can see some of the basic information about these individual saves. If I click on one of these, I believe I can get, yeah, it's loading here. Take it a second. There we go. I can see exactly the computer that was used, what the IP address again was that was used to actually save this model, or in this case, open this project. I can see the information in that project at that point in time. And I can also see a little score down here related to the warnings versus project size. So I can see if there's anything to worry about. Now, the nice thing about this, again, very low impact on your setup. So when this comes out, you won't have to have SQL Server. You won't have to have all that infrastructure in place. The downside for you, you can't customize these reports. Now for you, if this is all you're looking for is a basic health check, you don't need to customize the reports, right? But if you're a slightly larger company and you want much deeper information and you want to customize this and tie it into other systems, The Data Suite server side is probably better for you. Again, you can talk with our sales team, talk with your account managers at ATG. They would be more than happy to help talk you through what this looks like for your company. And they can certainly get you pricing as well and access to trials depending on what your kind of install base or what it is you need to set up in your company. With that, I'm going to probably close this out today. Thank you for your time. If you do have any questions, I'll keep an eye on that Zoom chat window over there. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in there. But we do appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you on a future ATG presentation about the CTC Express tools. Thank you, and have a fantastic day.